Very first season.
Yes.
Well, that's the nice thing, you guys keep coming back every year to promote your show, which is pretty cool.
We love it. We love it. Comic-Con's so important. Marcos Siega, executive producer.
So you guys have reached a bit of a crossroads with the series at the end of season 2, going into season 3. It's not so much a sort of a relaunch, but a chance to really explore a lot of new directions for the characters and take the story in a different direction, isn't it?
It is, but I do hope it's a bit of a relaunch because what we really want to try and accomplish is make the show accessible to an audience that maybe hasn't experienced a show in the past. We're going to go back to what the pilot did, which was if we have to fill in the story to make it clear, we'll go to flashbacks. I do think it's an interesting crossroads because we have to evolve away from Joe Carroll. And he's such a huge part of the show and his character had such a big impact on the series. We want to make sure we can honor that in this season as we try and close out that chapter.
What can you tease about how some of the dynamics between the two characters are going to change?
I think the biggest, what we're going to do this year is really test whether or not they can get past some of the hurdles that are going to be thrown at them, but in a way that we haven't done in the past, because this year they're dealing with the sins of the past. All the things that they've done in season 1, season 2 are kind of going to come back to haunt them. And that's a nice through line to be able to put into the series that we didn't have before, because we didn't have the history built in. The challenge is, again, doing that and still making it accessible to a new audience.
Did it feel like in the second season you guys kind of found your way a little more? Because from a viewer standpoint, it felt like to me that, okay, now this is the follow. I hooked into it more.
It's interesting. It's funny to hear you say that because we actually struggled with, right in the middle of season 2, the whole cult of it all. Kevin Williamson always knew where he wanted things to go, but as you start doing things and there's a million variables that go into making a creative decision, sometimes those variables are things that have nothing to do with the show. Whether there's availability of actors or whatever it is, and you have to kind of navigate around them. I felt personally that the cult storyline took us too far away from what we do best. Joe suddenly, to me, lost a little bit of his power in the mystery that he had. But Kevin's such a great writer. What we have in spades and what we've always done well is being invested in our villains and the character stories that our villains do have. I don't think there's another network show that has good guys and bad guys that actually accomplish that outside, in not genre world, but in the real world. If it's Criminal Minds or NCIS, your bad guys are disposable. You set them up, you take them down. And we sort of live in a world where you set them up and you fall in love with them. And then you don't want them to be taken down. And that's where the drama comes from.
Did you find that when you took Joe Carroll out of the equation that you were basically left with a sort of a Joe Carroll-sized hole in the series? Because you can't sort of just plop another sort of bad guy in to replace him, can you?
No, that's the $1 million question for us. How do we do that? And we brought in, we have 2 writers who were on staff last year, Alexi Hawley and Brett Mahoney, we were all made co-showrunners this year, and the 2 of them really had a great handle on how to fill that void and how to make that transition. It's the thing that really excited me. This all happened sort of post-Comic-Con in San Diego. We were headed down a different path, and we realized exactly that. It's like, how do we do this, make it satisfying for our audience that is already invested in the show, and at the same time have a new audience understand it and buy into it. And Alexi and Brett sort of pitched me this idea. We went to the network, pitched it to them, and we suddenly realized, okay, we know what it is. I actually think this is the season where we find our stride.
At Comic-Con, you had mentioned that you needed Joe Carroll for one more thing to kind of wrap up. Is that still true, or did that change?
No, that's absolutely true, and that hasn't changed. The dynamic of why we need Joe and the challenges of how we're going to see Joe have not changed at all. It's really really the transition out of Joe. There's a lot of ways you can go, and some are more satisfying than others, and some are more predictable than others. There are things we knew we didn't want to do, so we were just staying away from them entirely, and then you realize there's a reason that some things work traditionally. But that's why that's why the writers do what they do. They get in a room and they figure it out, and we talk about it and make it work. I'm excited about it, but that stayed the same.
Connie Nielsen was a great curveball. She was like charming us all, and we had no idea.
Yeah, but that was part of my thing last year. We originally intended on playing that game a little bit longer. We were going to see Lily and Ryan get into that relationship that was sort of set up in episode 2. And then, again, a lot of reasons why things happen, but at least we got to that reveal in episode 3. You have 15 episodes to sustain. If you remember, we then got rid of Lily for 2 episodes towards the end, just because we were left with this void of we didn't have story to tell.
Are there any other guest stars coming up that you can tell us about?
Well, we have, right off the bat, we have 2, Hunter Parrish, who was on Weeds, and Ruth Kearney, who this summer I went to go direct a show called Tyrant for FX, and I met her there and she blew me away. So when I got the first outline and I saw we needed a young couple, Hunter actually was going to be Luke and Mark. And originally, before we even looked at Sam, and he was always somebody we wanted on the show. Couldn't do it because of schedule, and luckily we found Sam, who everyone knows is incredible. And so we were bringing him in and Ruth, and they're in a relationship, and they'll play a big part. I don't want to give any more away than that, but it's really fun, and it's different than what we've done in the last 2 seasons.
Are you guys having fun with the sort of the reversal of your lead characters, in that Kevin now maybe has a short moment of happiness, which presumably you guys are not going to let last long, and Sean, who was sort of the much happier guy, is now sort of on a crusade of his own. So it's not like the characters have reversed positions, but they've certainly evolved quite a bit since season 1, haven't they?
They've evolved, but that was calculated. If you go back to the pilot, when Weston talks about Hardy, if you really listen to what he's saying about Ryan Hardy, everything he says then sort of applies to him now. And all the things that he felt about Ryan and the things he felt Ryan was doing wrong are the same mistakes he's making now. Because he's making choices in season 3 emotionally. He's not thinking about them. And it makes sense. His father was murdered, and that bloodlust is hanging over him, and it ruins his relationship with Max that we thought we got to a really good place at the end of last year. You earned that moment when they kissed, and I think everyone was rooting for that. We're going to come back a year later and see that they're not together. We will go back and see flashbacks as to what happened, but it's going to give you again, I loved that part of the story last year, not the Mike struggling with the killers, but Mike, the potential of Mike and Max. And because we have that history and we've earned that with our fans, it'll be a fun story to tell now outside of the world of just chasing bad guys. And for me, the single biggest accomplishment of season 3 is that if you look at season 1, our villains, you got to see our villains fall in love, be deceptive with each other, interact. They had friendships. They were very well-rounded characters, and you spent time with them. Our protagonists were well-rounded, but they were always just chasing the villains. Everything about their story was get Joe Carroll, save Joey, save Claire. This year, we have this history with our protagonists, and we're going to explore that. It's Max and Weston, and it's very complicated. It's Ryan being in love for the first time. So we're actually going to flip from what we've done in the past and spend more time with the character moments on the protagonist side. And that's fun because we have Sean Ashmore and Kevin Bacon and Jessica Stroke, who are just phenomenal actors that haven't had a chance to do that yet.